Hey folks, this is Mr. Prickly, and once again, welcome to another exciting episode of Prickly Draws. Today I am making a skeleton warrior. At one point in time, I wanted to make something either cute or something sexy. Unfortunately, with my fan base, if I did something cute, they'd probably take it the wrong way. And as for something sexy, well, knowing myself, I'd probably get it flagged by YouTube. So instead, we're going to go with something scary. Something a little more thought-provoking, and I decided to go with the good old-fashioned classic, the Undead Warrior. Originally, I was going to go with a skeleton warrior, but that would have meant having to break out the old anatomy books. And I didn't want to go that far, so instead he's an undead warrior with a skull face. I've already blotted out the sketch lines, the basic pose, placing in colors for where I want separate objects to be, such as the sword, the lantern, the helmet, and the sort of the scale mail armor coming off of the helmet. I'm now into the inking phase. I've done most of the face. I'm now moving on to the body. Coming off of the torn, haggard shirt, the haggard and withered skin and musculature, placing in basic details as they are required, putting in just the basic hint of where I want certain shadows to be, certain line weight to fall, reminding myself that the only light source in this drawing is going to be that lantern. That's something that we all have to remember when we're doing a drawing that has a dedicated light source, that wherever that light is, a shadow must fall on the opposite side. Too many times I see artists, even professionals, making the mistake of having their character overly lit when there's only one light source, or having shadows where they shouldn't be. It's kind of like having vein pop where you don't have veins. You know what I mean? Okay, here I am working on the hands, trying to get some basic hands done around the lantern. To this day, I've been drawing for almost 20 years, and to this day, I still have problem with hands. I should just spend a day, take out the whiteboard, and do nothing but draw hands. Hands, hands, hands. It's what I did for feet. I had to draw feet, I had to draw eyes, noses, mouths, facial expressions. Just spend a whole day drawing hands. Now on to the outline. One of my favorite things to do is draw in an outline. I usually do, for the outline, I do double the thickness of my regular pen weight. So if my regular pen is 10 pixels, then my outline is going to be 20 pixels. That way when I reduce it, the outline will look nice and crisp, as will the generic ink line. This also helps make whatever details I put in that much more involved looking. It's an old classic trick that the old school artists would do when everything was pen and paper. You had to draw it big. You know, sometimes it was, instead of 7 by 10, you did an 11 by 14 drawing and then you reduced it down. I've seen some artists use a full-sized piece of Bristol board, one of those big ones you get in the shops, And they'll just fill that, and that'll be the covered drawing. That's how you get this beautiful, beautiful inked drawing. And it's for the cover of a small comic book. But they needed that size to get that kind of detail, you know what I mean? Okay, now I'm putting the details in. Starting with the helmet and the face, getting those beautiful scale mail chips in. Going for the eyes. Now, I love the sunken-eyed look. The blacked-out eyes, with that little bit of light coming from the only light source, that lantern. Speaking of which, that's going to get some detail too, the lantern and the glove. Now, the reason why the glove has some shadow to it on that part, on the underside, is because it's closest to the top of the lantern, which is blocking the light. Whereas the rest of that character is going to be fairly shadowless, or should be fairly shadowless. Now the shirt gets some excessive ink put in there. I know I just said that the shirt should have less to it. This is one of the things about hindsight. Hindsight is 20/20. If I was to do this portion again, I probably would have put less ink on the underside of the shirt that's closest to the lamp. Don't ask me why I didn't do that. I think because at the time I was thinking of just going this with just a straight black and white. I wasn't thinking of going grayscale with the drawing. Yeah, see, I was gonna go hatch out every single line, and I remembered, wait a minute, I have a nib that does all that. So I went and I got out my nib that has the beautiful little hatch lines on it, and I'm doing that. I'm using it kind of like a stamp in a way. I'm stamping in all those beautiful little hatch lines, thus giving fabric the look of fabric. As a result, I realized at the last minute, oh, I didn't have to go so heavy on the ink with the shirt, but we can just chalk it up saying, hey, it's just a really dark shirt. They did have really dark fabric back in the Middle Ages. And here I am with one of my favorite little nibs. I have two different pebble nibs. This is the one I like to use for leather work or harsher clothing, more weathered materials. Then I have the one that's a more even pebbling, which I like to use for metals, such as this one. This is the even one, which I like to use for helmets, anywhere it has to be pitted or dented or dinged. It's just a time saver. Sometimes taking some time out and creating a whole bunch of assets, a whole bunch of nibs, a whole bunch of fill textures will help save you time in the long run. It may be a few hours of doing this, it may take a whole day of doing this, but it saves you time. Time that you can better spend on your characters. This is why I very rarely will draw in a house or a specific object or something, because if it's something I'm going to use all the time, I'll just make a bunch of different generic houses. I will make a bunch of generic castles, hills, mountains, etc. If these are places that are going to be always used, then why redraw them all the time? Yes, you get that look of sameness, but when you're talking about working in a schedule, every way you can save time, the better. I've pretty much finished with the bulk of the details at the moment. I'm now just looking over what needs to be done. Do I like what I see? Oh, fairly much. His skin's fairly haggard. Shirt looked like it's ready to fall off him. Big, bulky gloves from where there used to be nice, meaty hands. Okay, I've just flattened all those ink layers into one layer. I open up a separate piece, and now I copy and paste, bing bing, onto the new one. Now everything looks all nice and smooth. I then add a fill layer. Remember that too, boys and girls. Layers. Always do everything in layers. That way you just edit one layer instead of the whole piece. Here I am putting in a simple wall, which I have made using two different fills, one of which is a wall texture that I made, and the other is a brick texture that I made, set to a specific layer effect. I have then combined the two into making a simple castle wall, place some perspective deformation on it, so it'll have the look of a hallway. And now I'm putting in lighting and shading. I realized that I did not put in the internals of the lantern. So now I'm drawing in some simple internals, trying to match the art style, the fill style, etc., etc. At one time, I was going to draw in a candle, and then I remembered, wait a minute, I have my asset page, which has a candle in a small little holder. So then I just copy the part of the candle I need, desaturate it so it looks black and white, place it in there, and there we go. We now have a lantern with a candle. Since the internals of the lantern are going to be fairly well lit, I don't have to put in any real shading. I'm now using a splatter nib. I use that for highlight. I then do a zoom blur so that it'll look more radiant instead of just doing a Gaussian blur. That's another thing. Play with your blur textures. I'm giving him the once over again, seeing what I gotta do. Adding a little more shading. The little things can make or break. If it's not working one way, try a different way. See, here I am doing light experimentation until I finally have what I think will work. And then I just go with that, and now I'm doing my last bits of shading. Now that I have my dedicated light, I'm putting in my dedicated shadows. This will help make whatever lit parts there are pop out that much more. And I like what I see. Here we have it, the final piece. the undead warrior in the hallway. If you like this video and you want to see more, donate to my Patreon. If you like this piece of artwork and you want to see more, check out my DeviantART page. The links are in the description below. And thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.